Okay, today we are going to be looking at the editing process for our research paper. So, up till now, you should have finished your revision stages, and now you're ready for that final editing. Okay, so the first slide here shows us the editing procedures. In order to use my links, which you already have access to, but in order to use those, you're going to need to use the slideshow rather than this screencast to access those very quickly. But basically, these are the things that I want you to be looking at during this process. So, editing is about grammar and usage, it's about the mechanics of the paper. So, you're going to be looking at things like comma errors, capitalization errors, apostrophe errors, paragraphing errors. Make sure all of your paragraphs are indented and that there's not extra space between paragraphs. And awkwardly worded phrases. Make sure that everything that you're saying comes across very clear. Sometimes things don't come across clearly because we're trying to be complex. We're trying to use more complex sentence types or bigger vocabulary, which is really wonderful. But at the same time, if our message is getting lost somewhere in that complexity, it could be a better idea to simplify. So keep that in mind. Please make sure this is a formal paper that you're not using pronouns such as I or you. You're avoiding the first and second person. Make sure that you're not shifting in verb tense. So most of you are writing papers about historical events that happened in the past. You want to make sure that you're talking about past and you keep it in the past. If you're talking about something in the present, that you keep that in the present. So read over just thinking about what tense your verbs are in. You can skim your draft backwards to identify misspelled words, and then make sure that you spelled out numbers up to 10. Once you get to 11 and higher, you can write the actual numerals out. Now, the other part of the editing is format. So, three things that I want you to look at specifically. The first one was optional. If you chose to integrate a photo or a graph into your paper, you need to make sure you've done that properly. Remember, those need citations, they need to be relevant, etc. You need to make sure that your works cited page and your in-text citations are correctly done as well, and that the paper as a whole fits proper MLA, the Modern Language Association's format for writing papers. So make sure that you go to the slideshow and click on those links there. Okay, so just to make a quick nod, when you did your grammar corrections over your personal narrative, I asked you to be looking for patterns. So I'm hoping that you did that. So before you go back into this list and start looking for errors, I have a tip for you that might actually help make this easier, because I was a professional editor for a while, and it is kind of a painful job, to be honest. If you don't already have really good grammar and really solid grasp of all of the rules in your head, looking for them and trying to make corrections just sort of as a whole is difficult to do. So being able to go back into your draft with specific things in mind is really helpful. So I'm hoping that you actually took my advice when you made your grammar corrections, and you recognized in your own writing what patterns of mistakes you're making. If you did, then I want you to access that knowledge that you gained, and make yourself a quick little list, or pull up your list of commonly made mistakes so that you can go back and find them. Now, thinking about these will give you specific places to re-enter your draft and reevaluate for grammatical mistakes. So have a look at the next slide here. So I've created a key for you just to give you some quick ways to look at things. Now, once you've read your draft 100 times, you're reading what you meant to write and not what you actually wrote. We all do it. All of us do. So I'm trying to give you some clues here to help you out. The first one is to skim your draft backwards. Yes, I said skim. I'm not saying read it. Okay, yes, reading it is going to be the final piece, and that's important. But sometimes being able to look for clues about ways that we can then revisit our draft and know where is a specific place we might want to make an evaluation can really help make this process easier. So on the left-hand side here in this column, I've given you a list of some common errors that are made, grammatical errors that are made, and then to the right here, these are clues that you can look for in your text. So let me explain how this works. You're going to skim backwards through your drafts. You're going to start at the end and you're going to go backwards this way, for example, okay? Now, for example, the first one, I misspelled splices. Whoops. The first one here, compound sentences, comma, splices. Your clue here are conjunctions. So if you're taking two complete sentences and putting them together, you need to do that with a conjunction. So those conjunctions are the fanboys, okay, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. So what you can do is you can start skimming backwards like so, and if you find an and, just pause for a moment and say, what is this and doing? Is it creating items in a list? Is it connecting phrases? Is it connecting, I don't know, what's it connecting? If that and has a complete sentence before it and a complete sentence after it, it needs a comma before it. If what comes after the and is not a complete sentence, i.e., it's probably missing a subject, then it doesn't need a comma. So your clue is to look for those conjunctions and then evaluate, is this a compound sentence? Do I need a comma? Okay. Next one's participial phrases. So these are often ing words. They can be ed as well, but those are not as common. So I'm just going to give you the clue for the ing words for the participial phrases. So for example, in my instructions, if I skim backwards, what I find a looking. Ooh, here's an ing word. Looking for the clues. Okay, that's a participial phrase. Oh, there's my comma, so I've done it correctly. So the same thing applies here for these. Introductory phrases, if you find the subject of the sentence, if there's anything in front of it, you never go wrong with putting a comma before the subject of the sentence. In quoted material, you're going to look for quotation marks. Go back and find everything that you've quoted. Check that it's not a floating quote. Check that it's got a proper citation and that the period is after that parenthetical citation, including that parenthetical citation then in that sentence as a whole. And then in-text citations might be things that weren't directly quoted. So go back and look for parentheses. Make sure that you have what is inside that parenthetical citation matches the first entry on your works cited page. So I'm hoping this will give you really direct places to look in your draft for how you can edit and make it better, rather than just going with the whole global idea of just reading and rereading and rereading. That's a technique that really fails us. So give this a shot. Here as well, don't forget you have a punctuation checklist that I created for you. Again, you'll need the slideshow in order to access this checklist. And that brings us to the end of the editing phase. So I'm going to click back up here, making sure that you check all of these things in your editing before you submit your final draft.